In this episode of Here's to the Ladies Who, we explore the expansion of the industry, both within the shutdown and during its early return. Setting up the growth for the future of Broadway and beyond. This is Here's to the Ladies Who.
I'll be honest, I didn't even have a laptop at home. I just had my work laptop. I was always here at the theater. I have certainly found the biggest change for me is I try to just not sweat the small stuff. I don't think I realized how much I was existing in a constant level of New York crazy, running, stress, busy, busy, busy. I gave up my apartment about a year into all of this. And I actually moved to Savannah, Georgia with my boyfriend in this beautiful historic home and have sort of been splitting my time. I feel like I'm living my best life. I've gotten the best of both worlds, that I've been able to keep this career I love and also sort of have the personal life I've always dreamt of.
I think just better quality time with people and being more intentional about how and with who I'm spending my time. I don't have to go to everything I'm invited to. It's okay to just have time to do nothing, and nothing is still a thing because you're resting yourself. Even if it's just playing on your phone or watching a television marathon or knitting, whatever it is, doing whatever your nothing is, that's okay.
One of my favorite writers is Anne Helen Peterson, and she wrote this beautiful article about how you're not working remote, you're working remote in a pandemic, and those are two completely, totally different things. And as someone who has worked remote for a long time, I used to enjoy working remote. The pandemic took all that joy away because working remote is about flexibility and freedom and doing your laundry or picking your kids up or being able to live your life and still do your job. And if we believe that all these women deserve to have whatever lifestyle they choose, then we have to be pro flexible work. Even before the pandemic, but even more so now, I want all women to be standing in solidarity of whether you have kids or whether you don't have kids. Like, everyone's got a life outside of work, and you need to support and uplift everyone to be able to do whatever they need to do. Like, we have to support each other to make that happen and not just drag back because that's the return to status quo from before.
As a single parent, there was virtually no time. One of the things that changed for me with my schedule, which prior to the pandemic had been, get up, take my daughter to daycare, go to work, do my full day, and then come home and cook dinner for her, and bath time and bedtime and all of that, and then usually work some more. But in the absence of that, I actually started getting up even earlier just to have some time for myself. So I would get up at like 5:30 and do some yoga and just kind of like have some quiet time before she was awake, because during the day it was trying to keep her entertained and engaged. She actually did virtual preschool for a little while. So, keeping her Zooms aligned with my Zooms, strategically planning her naps so that if I had like a really important meeting that I just needed absolute focus, I would try and time a nap so that it would align with that. She eventually decided that she would like to guest star in all of my Zoom meetings, which is mildly entertaining for my coworkers, slightly frustrating on my part.
I think I did what so many other parents did in the beginning, which is come up with a schedule. Here's our daily routine. I put it on poster board. It was color coded, and that lasted 4 days. And then it became the season of Netflix. And thank God that the next episode just rolls into the next episode, rolls into the next episode. And all I can say is I did the best I can. I did the best I could every day. And most days I felt like I was failing utterly at everything. And yet we all just did what we could. So it was really a lot of letting go and a lot of shedding, and then, refocusing back in on the things that were really important, is that my family is safe and my son is enjoying his childhood. And that was a lot of Netflix. So that's where we netted out.
I've always really loved cooking, and my husband and I both like to cook, and we like to cook together. So once the sort of initial 4 to 6 weeks, when you started to realize that it was actually going to be a long time, and when the things at least normalized a little bit into a rhythm of how you got groceries and how that was going to work, we did start cooking, and we've just cooking dinners and spending time together. And I think something that I will actually really miss now that we're back to the hectic pace.
I'm interested to see how, and how the sort of work ethic thing rolls out. I think people have had this opportunity of time. And what does that feel like when it goes away? Are we going to go back to that crazy schedule, or are we going to continue to find ways to carve out time for ourselves and each other? I think that's going to be important. And for me, where I am in my life, and it's like I'm old enough to retire if that's what I wanted to do. It's not what I want to do, but I am old enough to do that. So I don't need to keep pushing myself like a crazy person. If I can at least roll back and remind myself of that, that's my job on myself. I have to keep doing that.
It's like working on show to show, and it was just kind of like a hamster wheel of tasks. And I'd never really had the time or bandwidth to step back and be like, what do you want to contribute to this entire community? What is the thing that you were meant to contribute to this community?
That's what I'm finding hard is life is now, we're back full speed. It's very disconcerting to be back the way we were. And it's as if the 18 months never happened. And I think everyone I talked to was trying to figure out, how do we allow for what we learned as human beings while still keeping the work moving forward.
The question that I offer anybody, and including myself almost daily, is just how am I making all of this information, all of these learning points relevant to me, right? I think in terms of anti-racism, I think in terms of Broadway, I think in terms of the theater, I think in terms of the theater industrial complex, the calling that I hope more and more people hear is a calling for themselves to be healed, right? And through that, how does that reverberate through the industry and help kind of shape and mold where we're going? And so as much as possible for people to acknowledge that they too are survivors of an abusive industry. That's a cross difference, right? And then again, how are we in relationship to ourselves? How are we in relationships to others? And how are we in relationship to our environment? And if we can just stay there long enough to sprout some roots, I really do think that we can create a lasting, disruptive, transformative impact.
I suspect we're going to see a lot of stories that are linked directly to what artists have been through and the community's been through. I think that Soho Rep has been, for as long as I've been involved, very committed to playing a civic role, to maintaining a connection to the community in which it functions, locally and beyond. And I think that other theaters will feel that increasingly. And I think it's a very broad movement that's probably long overdue.
We partnered with Black Theater Coalition And we are creating 10 mentorships across the country, 7 different cities, to open our doors for paid internships to teach them the business. And wherever we have offices, we're going to have a mentor. And then we'll bring them all to New York to see Broadway shows and to meet some of the players here as well.
I feel a much bigger responsibility than I did 2 years ago to make sure that I'm creating space for other people, that in some ways the absence of work and my ability to bounce back has spoken to what I identify as a kind of privilege. In some ways, I feel more than ever, it's my job to like crack that door open and make sure that people who are outside being like, I'm talented too, I'm here too, get seen. And I hope for the whole industry that it's not just that we like, whew, we're back, but that we're back differently and more inclusively.
My mission right now is to make stories of queer and trans joy. I think there's plenty of stories of our traumas out in the world, and we need stories that people can empathize with and not just sympathize.
I think as an industry, we think a lot about what artists need. And I think what we're not doing is thinking about what administrators need. And I want, as an industry, for us to be thinking about how we can serve everybody, because artists are so important to the process, but I think administrators are really undervalued, and good administrators are undervalued, and we drive them out of the industry all the time because we don't value them and we don't value their work. And it is vital to the running of the industry.
The racial reckoning was happening outside the industry, but also within the industry. And there were these incredible people who were cropping up as leaders, but I didn't see anyone in the commercial theater space at the time. I just was wondering, realizing really quickly, like, where are the other non-white folks in the commercial producing industry? And I realized that I didn't really know anyone. So I was already brainstorming, like, what is the part of this industry that I can work to diversify and change? And commercial producing is such a niche part of the industry and is actually really, really opaque in many ways. And so we realized this is like an avenue that no one has touched and that we could really find a way to change. And so we
I think creating content for a virtual stage, there are mechanics to accessibility that make your content, whether that is audio descriptions, whether it's captioning, whether it is just providing sign language interpreters. There's so much that we can do to make our theater more accessible, because for so long, the virtual stages and physical stages felt like they had to be either or instead of one and the same to create a really rich universe that arts and culture lovers can be a part of. To me, that's the exciting creative challenge that we all have as we look to, to use the like post-pandemic version of theater and what that looks like.
I was very resistant as a producer to kind of the Zoom readings and the virtual events, because I found that even though we're connected on Zoom, there is still a barrier. You can't look each other in the eye. Even how do we navigate that genuine connection? What we've realized is that this platform is a really great way to foster international collaboration and create access and connection where we can't be in person together, not necessarily because of the pandemic, but just because of geography and resource.
Something interesting that we saw is an increase in customers who had not participated in what we call experiences. These are add-on experiences, not just seeing the show, but an experience that might take place before or after the show in normal times, a meet and greet, a Q&A with cast members, that sort of event.
The idea isn't to make it lesser. The idea is to make it something so different and complementary that you could experience it, and your appetite for experiencing it differently live is not diminished. It's actually increased, right? And the ways in which we can find different modalities of storytelling, theatrical storytelling, to coexist and to appeal to people in a way that isn't perceived as cannibalizing or diminishing the beauty or preciousness of either one, I think is really where we're headed. So if Broadway can be everything it's always been and also contain these avenues for anyone who wishes to access it, it's an extraordinary win through a very difficult set of circumstances.
I think what's fascinating about America is that we have not experienced anything beyond this commerce-driven sense of urgency. Honestly, we are having a hard time imagining a different world. I think we're creating something, or at least maybe creating the foundation for a couple of generations later. But I'm interested in using this time to imagine something different, to help people create maybe pilot programs and opportunities that are not driven by white supremacy culture characteristics, and building organizations that are essentially led by people who have been disenfranchised and who have suffered from the inequities of America. I want them at the decision-making, at the beginning of the decision-making, at the head of it. I think it will create a new type of organization. Decision-making, I want to empower them as much as possible to be there so that then when they start making decisions, it creates like catalysts or it creates like a chain effect. If I can at least awaken people to the idea of something different, like a different world, then maybe a few will latch on to it. So I want to excite enough people to like go ahead and say the things that we know we've been wanting to say. And then ideally it creates a bit of a movement. Hopefully in our generation, there will be a shift. I'd love to see it, but if not, we're at least contributing to the shift at a later time.
I think it's really important to tell some more stories about other options of careers in the industry than just performing. I think that there are so many, especially young women, who just don't know what opportunities exist.
One of my other projects is an organization called The Business of Broadway, which I started with Erica Rotstein and Rachel Sussman and Dana Lerner. And we started it in 2019, October 2019, with the intention of democratizing knowledge about how this industry works. Not necessarily to train the producers of tomorrow, though we are very happy to do so, but to train the theater makers of today, the people that maybe identify themselves wearing more artistic hats. And so either through siloing, don't have an understanding of what's happening on the business side, or just never really took an interest in it. And so we wanted to create community with them so that we could all be a more knowledgeable industry, because frankly, this industry has a lot of problems and there are a lot of ways that we can fix it.
I was able to really dig in more fully to Open Stage Project. We serve about 300 high school women all throughout New York City. And the one silver lining was that it really gave all of us a breath to connect on a human level with everyone, because we were all at home.
There's a really incredible organization called Create Her. And what they are is a organization for emerging playwrights and producers, girls in high school. And they do a semester where a producer produces one of the playwrights' plays. And one of the co-directors from Create Her came to me at BWA and said, would you do a mentor-mentee program with our alumni? Because these are the girls we want to continue and bring along in this business. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And we put out a call to BWA and we had so many people say, I'm in. And it was really amazing to see the growth of not only the mentors, but the mentees and what they were learning and getting out of it. And for me, what I really learned in the pandemic is like that inspired me in a way that I never would have had the bandwidth to tap into had it not happened. And so this idea of mentoring and leadership and working with students has fulfilled me and brought something into my life that I'm like, oh, this always has to be here now. It would not have happened had we not had the BWA Create Her program kind of combined, which served both of us, which served these young women who wanted to hear from us and also us who needed them to inspire us.
I want to make sure that new voices are heard, and it's not the same people that we keep hearing from. It's not, that we need to be more inclusive as an industry as a whole, and I think that's what my main thing is when I'm looking to develop a piece. It's like, what's the story? Who wrote the story? Who's it about? I can't wait for women to run Broadway.
Yeah.